because I think that there were concern of how privatization could affect the security situation in Kosovo. For example, when the process was halted from 2003 to 2005, it seems like the events of March 2004 very much led international officials to restart privatization, because they were worried that if privatization was halted much longer, that would lead to more security problems. And I think that shows very much how the whole state-building operations, how the whole UNMIK operation, how the whole international administration in Kosovo operates within this view that security is the most important thing of all, even in the economic field. So even economic decisions are taken based on security concerns. And I'm not sure whether you can categorize in the fields of the needs of the people, but it at least has something to do with local reaction to their actions. Also, I think that there was some people that they were very worried about. For example, the people that had bought the property during the period of Milosevic. That was, of course, not the general population, but that was these individuals that they were very worried about being sued from. So there were also some people that they were thinking about the needs and interests of. But in general, I don't think that the economic needs, the economic rights of the people were given that much attention, and certainly not as much attention as it should.
Thanks for letting me have a second bite of the cherry. I applaud your analysis of the problems of both process and outcomes of the privatization in Kosovo. But I'm a little concerned that in moving from that analysis into our discussion of privatization generally, we seem to be missing 2 points or 2 contexts. The first is that I do see privatization as being part of a package of a specific state-building model that is being applied here, which is of driving Kosovo towards European integration. And there are many pillars in that model, including multi-party democracy and rule of law and free trade with limits, or at least internal free trade to the European market, and a market economy of private ownership. And I'm not sure that you can divorce the privatization policy from the other components of that state-building model. It certainly would not be tenable to have a different kind of economy within the European Union framework. And my second concern is that we need to distinguish between different types of privatization. Within the European Union, the debate on what should be kept in the public sector is largely focused on questions of natural monopoly, although obviously there are also countries that are concerned about maintaining strategic control over natural resources. The overwhelming majority of SOEs that were privatized were small retail and service establishments. And I think we need to be realistic about whether, about differentiating between whether cafes or travel agents should be publicly owned or socially owned, as opposed to a natural monopoly like the airport or the distribution arm of keg. I haven't heard so far in this discussion that you are, and that I applaud you for trying to create this discussion, but I think that those are 2 aspects of the discussion that should not be overlooked. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for allowing me also a second turn. Just to maybe correct one thing, the report on the privatization that was done in 2008 was an external report, so it was not us evaluating ourselves. And I think, again, we have to be realistic. What were the alternatives? I have not heard a convincing answer to this. Waiting? I don't think so. First, because at that time, we didn't know what the final status of Kosovo would have been. If you look at, for example, KEK, I dare to make the case that it would actually have been better if KEK would have been privatized much earlier. Because what you saw, and you would have seen that also with SOEs that were loss-making, and most of them were, is that you would have an incredible drain on the budget, on the Kosovo consolidated budget. So this was also a consideration that was taken into account. If you want to have a stable society, you cannot have these enterprises that are a drain on the budget. And when actually comparing the privatization process in Kosovo with neighboring countries, I feel that the results are not so bad at all. If you compare it to Macedonia, if you compare it to Serbia, I think that we can be quite happy with the progress made here. And it is also a bit of a tricky situation to look at employment figures before and after. Because if you realize that most of the people registered as employees in these enterprises were actually idle, were sitting at home, then of course, if you want to have an efficient production process, it is unavoidable that that people are laid off. But actually, what it does, it is pulling people back into the labor process, because most of them were not actually working for these enterprises. Also, the statement that the international community played a more important role here than in neighboring countries, yeah, well, that's obvious because of the special situation that Kosovo was in. So, don't get me wrong, I would also have been in favor of a more comprehensive process in which authorities would have been consulted much more. But at the same time, I feel we have to be a bit realistic, and if you look at it at that time, I don't think that there were any other realistic alternatives available. Thank you.
Thanks. In my opinion, the question whether there are alternatives to privatization is not of the main importance. I completely agree with Chris that most of Kosovars will have the same opinion, that there is no alternative to privatization. The important point is here to the question, who should privatize, when, to what extent, what is the most important thing, what methods of privatization should be implemented. And this method of privatization depends on the goal that you want to achieve. In Kosovo, we say the goal or the privatization is an instrument in our strategy to increase the efficiency of the economy, to influence economic growth. But then the method that was used had nothing to do with this goal. The method that was used is sell to the highest bidder. So practically the goal is to make money, and this core goal was missed because all companies were sold, no money was generated. So practically first you miss the goal, you miss the link between the goal and the instrument, and second, the method or the goal that you apply